Greetings, it is I, Countess Naravan Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue my discussion on the Pathfinder role-playing game system. We last left off, we began diving into magic items. Today I'm going to be talking about some more important details about magic items you're going to want to know about. So the first thing I want to talk about is magic items and size. Because when you find a piece of magical jewelry or clothing, it might not be sized for a creature of whatever size category you are. The thing about these is they can easily be adjusted to the size of your creature through some kind of tailoring, or sometimes they oftentimes will be adjusted through magic. Size should not be a limitation to give your characters an option to use a magic item they have picked up, especially if it's something like a piece of clothing or jewelry. Now, there are exceptions to this. If it is an item based around a certain race, then yes, it's not going to resize. Also, weapons and armor can be found in a specific size. You'll determine randomly what size weapons and armor will come in. Now, when you're using magic items, traditionally you're going to be wearing them, basically pushing themselves on your body. Your body has 15 places where you can put a magic item. These are referred to as slots. The entire list of all 15 slots is in the book. You can take a look at it. But effectively, once you put a magic item in that area, it activates abilities and grants you the bonuses to that. A magic item, more than one in the same slot, do not stack. The first one gives effect, the second one does nothing. This isn't to say there aren't magic items that do not take up slots. These are magic items that either have to be carried on your person or worn on your person that will specifically say they don't take up a spot. It could be something you can hold, like a magic weapon. You're holding on to that. Then these things, not taking up your slots, you still need them to be with you in some way in order to use them. Now, there are many magic items which cause whoever basically gets affected by it to be affected by a spell or effect that mimics a spell. If this should happen, you're going to need to make a spell very often against it. Very often you're going to have to make a save against that spell or spell effect. To determine it for a magic item, you add 10 plus the spell level of the spell that it either is casting or effectively emulating, plus the minimum ability score modifier required to cast that spell. So you figure out what the minimum ability score is to cast that level of spell, which this magic item is basically casting, and then you determine that modifier for that, add it onto there. There you go. That's how you determine the DC. Now, the exception to this is staffs. Staffs are a unique exception because they can use the DC of spell casting for the person using them. So they're going to use the person's caster level, their ability scores, any modifiers they might get to certain types of DCs, if it matches the type of spell being cast from the staff, and add those all together. So it's treating it as if that spell is being cast by the wielder of the staff. Most magic items, though, other than these exceptions of staffs, will tend to list the DC in the description. This is especially true if whatever effect it's causing isn't exactly emulating a spell. It's having some kind of effect that it's not really doesn't sound like a spell, so you really can't judge it as one. So it needs to actually list that information for you, and it will. Now, the fact is, there are times which magic items can be the target of spells, or effects that cause them to make saves. There are 3 times a magic item will make a save. 1, if it is left unattended. Basically, if it's sitting out on the ground, and I do something to it, then yeah, it has to get a save. 2, if it's specifically being targeted by something. You can target a magic item. 3, if I, as the wearer of said magic item, roll on that one on a reflex save. Basically, I screw up and I kind of put my equipment in the way of the blast. Now, once a magic item has to make a save versus spell, which the fact is, it will get a save. There are spells that a non-magical item basically doesn't get a save against. It gets affected by it, it gets trashed by it. Magic items will get the save in this retrospect. They get that option because of their magical abilities. Their saves are standard for all of them. That means fortitude, reflex, and will are all the same. It will be 2 plus half the caster level required to create the magic item. Most magic items will list this information. You'll be able to figure out what caster level was to create it, divide it in half, round it down, add that to 2. That's the bonus they add to their saves. The exception would, of course, be in this case a intelligent item. Because they have a wisdom bonus, they can actually add a wisdom modifier to these. So their wisdom will be different for intelligent magic items, should you actually encounter one of those. Now, damage to a magic item does nothing to actually disrupt its magical abilities. If it gets enough damage to equal its hit points, then it's destroyed, it crumbles to dust, the magic is lost. Otherwise, it does nothing to it. It continues to function as normal, even should it hit the broken condition. Because just like a normal item, if it reaches half of its hit points in damage, then yes, it also gets the broken condition. Broken condition still can apply to certain things like magic weapons, but it's just like a weapon being broken. Everything else, it doesn't stop the actual magic part of it. It affects the weapon part of it. Just like if it's not affecting the whatever you're wearing part of it, it's affecting not the magic, it's affecting its physical existence, that it's a broken necklace. Still magical. Now you can repair a magic item. There are 2 different ways to do this. There's one way where you can gather enough materials equivalent to half the original cost of the magic item and effectively spend that material to repair it back up to its full hit points. Or you could use the Make Whole spell. The Make Whole spell will also repair a magic item, but you have to be of appropriate caster level with the Make Whole spell, so you might not be successful depending on that. Your caster level has to be close enough to the caster level of the magic item. So you can see there is a limitation on the Make Whole. The other way, not so much a limitation, just cost you money. Now if a magic item has charges, you're going to basically figure that once you find it as part of a treasure, more than likely it's not going to have those full charges. If you're assuming it's something like a wand with 50 charges, you will roll a D percentile and divide that by 2, round it down to determine the charges left minimum of 1. If it has some other variation on the number of charges with it, you will come up with a very similar mathematical formula to determine that. But regardless, the listed price for one of these items is equivalent to having full charges. As soon as it hits 0 charges, it's worthless. Anything in between, its price should be determined by a percentage of the charges remaining. Effectively, you figure out how much of the charges are remaining out of the full amount. You use math, figure out how much it's cost. For example, a 50 charge thing, you divide the base cost by 50, multiply by the number of remaining charges. There's the price of it. As simple as that. Now, another important thing to mention about magic items is they are valuable. They are expensive. If you are in a major city, more than likely you're going to find 1 or 2 shops selling a few magic items. This could be something like a general store shop selling a few potions. It could be a armor shop, weapon shop that's selling a few magical weapons on the side. May or may not be also working to produce a couple of them. It's very hard to say. This is, of course, assuming that you're using the average level of magic items in your game, that when you go to one of these shops, it's not going to have every magic item possible. It's going to have a limited selection. Now, the easiest way to determine this is your GM will have to determine the type of community and the size of community you are exploring. This comes up with some information which you are using to determine what kind of magic items are within the community. First off, it provides you with a base value. This base value is a number that if you are looking for a magic item of equal to or less than that number, you have a 75% chance of being able to find that magic item in this town or this city or this metropolis. Granted, it still requires you to take some time and search around for it to find the proper purveyor. You're not just going in a store and it's going to be there. You will take some time to search around for this. And this doesn't mean that you don't have a chance of finding it a couple weeks down the line. You can always possibly try again if you spend enough time. Now, this isn't the only magic items that exist here. Based again on that community we talked about, the size and type, there will be an additional number of randomly determined magic items, which you're going to use the various charts within the book to determine what kind of magic item is actually available. Your GM will roll on those and figure it out, again, by random chance. If the GM does roll an item below that base value, then they should re-roll it, because you could already theoretically get that at 75% chance. This is a random selection of items which are available. These items traditionally don't change out as much because these are the higher end items. Should one possibly be purchased, then yeah, you know, a spot that exists within the town will probably be taken up by something eventually. But again, this is also time consuming in order for things to change. This is effectively, once you're there in town, this is what's available, this is what you possibly could get. You never know what you're going to get that's above that base value. Very random chance. Now in an area of low magic, assume that the base value is half what it normally would be, and also half those extra... Assume the base value is half of what it normally would be. Or if you really want to, you could also have it that there are no magic items for sale if you're using the low magic rules. You can make it that you could only possibly find those in treasure, and that's the only way that you're going to get them. Both are very reasonable opportunities. On the other hand, if you're using high magic rules, where there's a lot of magic items, you could double the base value of the community you are in. You can also, as the GM, increase the effective community size by 1 for determining the base value. So whatever the community was, put it by 1, and that's the new base value. Both are reasonable options to use to represent the fact that there are much more abundance of magic items within your universe. Now it's important to note, items of particular value, high value, something like plate mail, that still are mundane, or items made of specific special materials, like something made of mithril or adamantine, will be determined, will count as magic items for these values. So you can see that they will be factored in just like your +1 sword, or your Cloak of Resistance +1. Your plate mail will be treated just the same in the same community. Same again with an adamantine sword of some type. Treat it the exact same way, even though they technically themselves are not magical. So in the next episode... So, that's it for today. I went over some more basics of magic items. I first talked about the size of the magic items you had, and then I moved into talking about the various places on your bodies, the slots on your bodies where you're going to be wearing and putting these magic items on. That you have 15 that don't stack with themselves, but you still have 15 places that you can place something and have a magic item. Then I talked about DCs, saves. This is both the saves you have to make against the effect of a magic item, and the saves a magic item might have to make themselves. Which moved into, of course, damaging magic items, and talk about repairing them. I finished up today, of course, by talking about the charges your magic items might have, if they're a type of magic items it has, and purchasing them. The basic rules for how you can figure out if you can purchase one in a town. You might be able to, you might not be able to. There's a little bit of random chance determined for everything when it comes to this. But in the next episode, I am going to move into talking about the description of magic items, the basic information that's provided, and talk about the various types of magic items as they are broken apart. But if you have any questions, comments, anything you would say, anything you think I left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. It shows support for the channel, the Empire, the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, you could always check out my Patreon. Link in the description below. But regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.